This video is about the Gothic classic continuity. The story of the Second Great Orc War begins with the death of the Holy Robar, and its history is deeply attached to that of Myrtana's ruling successor, King Robar II, the new chosen one of Enos. After the death of King Robar I, his son was crowned ruler of Myrtana. This happened around 20 years ago, and one of his first actions was to create a prison colony in the Valley of Mines on the island of Corinus. The king had big plans, for which he needed lots of weapons made of magical ore. Thus, he had a great idea. Let's increase production by throwing any and all criminals as forced laborers into the colony. Those that try to escape are killed on sight. Might as well throw some political enemies in there too. By the way, don't worry, we will talk about what exactly magical ore is in another video. 5 years later, he claimed Nordmar and declared it as part of Myrtana's kingdom. The main reasons for this were their smithies and the massive deposits of magical ore. In return, he had a few castles built in the icy mountains. To be entirely honest though, I'm pretty sure that if the king hadn't set his sights on conquest, things could and would have turned out much better for him, because from this point forward, the glory of crown and kingdom will take a nosedive quickly. Only 3 years after occupying Nordmar, King Robar II declared war on Verant. The desert land, at this point in time, were mostly occupied by orcs, the nomads who were traveling with the water mages, the Hashishian, and perhaps even more groups that haven't been specified. This war ended up known as the Battle of Verant, and the key players here are King Robar II with General Lee fighting for Myrtana, Warlord Lucor and Warlord Galen fighting for Verant, although it is unknown which factions exactly they were affiliated with. It is uncertain who committed to the first strike, but the earliest recorded battle began when Myrtana invaded, immediately leading to violent tensions with Galen's forces. However, this frontal attack was a distraction. Robar assembled his troops and attacked around their weak flanks. The Chosen One had no intention whatsoever to engage in any drawn-out battles or long skirmishes. He knew that to conquer Verant, one would have to strike fast and effectively. There was only one thing in Robar's mind that threatened the conquest: Galen and Lucor uniting against him. Preventing this was his highest priority, and so he focused his army to disrupt both of their supply lines while doubling down on Galen. It didn't take long until Galen's army fell. Without Lucor's support, Galen was overwhelmed and killed. His remaining troops tried to escape from the battle, but Robar had them hunted down. Unfortunately, all of this was part of Lucor's plan. The warlord waited until this opportunity has arrived, and then staged an all-out attack against Robar's by now exhausted troops, leading to many casualties for Myrtana. Even though the war has just begun, there are no records for what happens afterwards. The only certainties are that Robar left Verant after Lucor's attack, returning to Vanguard, the capital of Myrtana, leaving the rest of the war effort in the hands of his generals, most of all, General Lee. By the time Myrtana conquered the Verant coastline, they had already defeated most other enemies and made them subservient. This also included the water mages. Only one exception survived so far: Lucor, who has become an even bigger threat. Myrtana suffered too many losses, and they've grown outnumbered by Lucor's army. This is when General Lee had an idea. He lured the Verantians into a trap, forcing them to move deep into a swamp, limiting their movement. And then all he had to do was eliminate them all with arrows. This is ironic, since this is one of Gothic 3's major plot holes, as the country of Verant presented in that game was nothing but a desert and no swamps to be found, but let's ignore that. Back on topic, Myrtana, or rather General Lee, has thus won the war against Verant and occupied the country. All tribes were made subservient, with the exception of those living in the furthest south. It's not quite clear whether this has happened before or after the Battle of Verant, but during this time, another war took place on the Southern Isles, where the paladin, Lord Dominique, equipped with the Divine Shield of Fire, conquered the islands for crown and kingdom.
The Shield of Fire was borne by Dominique in the battle on the Southern Isles. But the power of the shield is never to be wielded again. Therefore, we have nailed it to the wall.
Now, Myrtana has near total control over the known world. King Robar II received the honorary title of Uniter of the Four Realms, and it seems like the rest of his rule would bring peace and prosperity. Unfortunately, this prosperity would end just after 2 years, as an old enemy re-emerges with a vengeance. The orcs, in numbers and with equipment never before seen, came over the northern borders of Nordmar like a wave of flesh. Before the king even realized what has happened, they have already taken control of Nordmar's most valuable ore processing facilities, cutting Myrtana off from their primary source of ore and weapon supplies. The Second Great Orc War has begun. King Robar was left with no choice but to arm a desperate defense, attempting to secure the borders to Nordmar, and in the meantime, he required a new source of magic ore. The only possible location that had the required amount of ore was the Valley of Mines on Khorinis. But there was one major complication. The amount of prison escapees was extremely high, leading to a severe lack of personnel to mine the ore. So in summary, not the best odds to establish the location as a permanent supply line, not to mention the long journey of perhaps a week or two on sea for transportation. Robar, feeling the rope around his neck getting tighter, was willing to accept any reasonable option available. His closest advisor, the highest ranking mage in the Circle of Fire, saw the perfect opportunity. He easily convinced the king of a new experiment, to create a unique magical barrier around the prison colony to make any and all escape impossible. A barrier meant to keep any living thing inside, but not meant to be harmful to those outside or those trying to enter. The king quickly got to work and called for 12 powerful mages, 6 from the Circle of Fire, 6 from the Circle of Water, in order to create the barrier. In addition to that, he ordered any and all criminals, no matter how small of an offense they may have committed, to be sent into the prison colony of Khorinis. Unfortunately, during the fragile summoning of the barrier, something disturbed the spell, causing it to not only encase the prison colony, but the entire Valley of Mines instead. The barrier trapped everyone inside. The mages that summoned the barrier, their guards, the prisoners' guards who weren't told about anything, and also the prisoners themselves. While the guards were confused to see a new rooftop at the sky, the prisoners used the opportunity. They united, assassinated, and ganged up on the guards until all of them were lying in a pool of their own blood. King Robar's back was against the wall. Not only has he lost 12 of the most powerful mages in the kingdom, but now he was at the mercy of the prisoners. He had no choice. He negotiated. Everything they demanded, he had to provide one way or another. Food, weapons, women, you name it, you got it. As long as the prisoners would work the mines and deliver the ore, they received all they wished for. Over the next 5 years, King Robar, Myrtana, Verant, and the Southern Isles led a futile defense against the hordes of orcs streaming down from Nordmar. The tide of war turned entirely in the favor of the orcs once they conquered Silden, which they then used as a base. It only took 1 more year for Geldern and Trellis to fall, ready for the orcs to be taken. Another year later, Montera fell to a siege. Before the orcs moved on to the rest of Myrtana, they invaded Verant instead. Thanks to an alliance with the Ashishin, they took control of Braga, Ben Erai, and Lago within just 2 short years. With Yashishin working as the acting army in Verant, the Orcs could refocus their attention to Myrtana and blasted through the south of the country, taking control over Cape Dun. Now, at the beginning of the first Gothic game, only Gotha, Faring, and Vanguard withstand the Orcs. The Chosen One, once again, was desperate for solutions. But that, and the continuation of the war, those are stories for another day.